The research ship drifted through the purple clouds of the Kepler Nebula. Inside, Dr. Hajin Park looked at her screens and smiled. After 3 months of searching, they had found it. Quantum crystals, thousands of them, maybe millions. These crystals were the most valuable thing in the galaxy. One crystal could power a starship for 50 years. The deposit her team found could change everything for humanity. Hajin touched her communication device. She needed to report this to Earth immediately. Her crew of 412 people celebrated in the background. They had no idea what was coming. Humanity had joined the Galactic Coalition 63 years ago. It happened when Captain Doyen met an alien trade ship near Neptune. Since then, humans tried to fit in with the other species. They followed all the rules. They stayed quiet. They built a small fleet of ships and called it a defense force. Most alien species thought humans were nice but boring, young and inexperienced, not important. The Coalition had 17 major species and hundreds of smaller ones. They all followed something called the Treaty of Harmonious Coexistence. When species had problems, they talked. They made deals. They used courts. Nobody fought wars anymore. War was old. War was stupid. That is what they believed. What they did not know was that humans were different. Humans were the only species that nearly destroyed themselves multiple times before leaving their planet. Humans knew war. They understood it in their bones. But they pretended to be peaceful because that is what the galaxy wanted. 3 days after Hajin's discovery, the Narveen arrived. The Narveen were one of the most powerful species in the Coalition. They had controlled the galactic core for 10,000 years. They were proud. They were strong, and they did not like that humans found the crystals first. High Chancellor Voslix commanded the Narveen fleet. He sent a message to Hajin's ship. The message was simple. Leave now. The crystals belong to Narveen. This nebula was Narveen territory thousands of years ago. It did not matter that they abandoned it. It did not matter that the space was unclaimed by any current law. Hajin sent back a polite message. She explained that under Coalition law, the crystals belonged to whoever discovered them. She said humans were willing to share. They could negotiate, talk, find a fair solution. Voslix did not want to talk. He wanted the crystals. More than that, he wanted to put humans in their place. These young species needed to learn respect. So he made a decision that would change the galaxy forever. Narvian warships opened fire without warning. Hajin's research ship had no weapons. It had basic shields meant to protect against space rocks, not military weapons. The first blast tore through the shields like paper. The second blast hit the engine core. The third blast split the ship in half. 412 people died in less than 2 minutes. Scientists, engineers, cooks, medical staff. Young people on their first space mission. Old people on their last, all of them gone. When news reached Earth, humanity stopped. Everything stopped. People gathered in the streets. They watched the news in silence. Many cried. Some got angry. But mostly people just stood there in shock. This was not supposed to happen. The galaxy was supposed to be civilized. Ambassador Taeyong Kim had worked for 30 years building relationships with other species. He rushed to the Coalition Council. He demanded justice. He asked for an investigation. He requested that Voslix face charges for murdering 412 unarmed civilians. The council listened politely. Then they did nothing. The Narveen were too powerful, too important. Voslix claimed it was an accident, a navigational error. His weapon systems malfunctioned. He was very sorry. These things happen in space. Nobody believed him, but nobody wanted to challenge him either. The Coalition decided to form a committee to study the incident. They would release a report in 6 months, maybe 12 months. They thanked Ambassador Taeyong for his patience and understanding. Taeyong returned to the human embassy. He called Earth. He spoke to the president and the military commanders. He told them the truth. The galaxy would not help. They were on their own. That night, the president of Earth convened an emergency meeting. Every military leader attended. Every government official. Everyone who needed to know. They discussed their options. They could accept the council's decision and wait. They could impose sanctions. They could withdraw from the coalition. Admiral Hajin Park attended the meeting. She was the older sister of Dr. Hajin Park, who died on the research ship. She was also the supreme commander of all human military forces. She listened to every suggestion. Then she spoke. Her voice was quiet, but everyone heard every word. She said that humanity tried peace for 63 years. They followed every rule. They smiled when other species insulted them. They accepted secondary status. They built a military but kept it hidden to avoid scaring anyone. And what did that get them? 412 dead civilians and a council that looked the other way. She said it was time for the galaxy to remember something it had forgotten. Humans did not evolve to be prey. They evolved to hunt. They climbed to the top of their food chain on a planet that tried very hard to kill them. They survived ice ages and plagues and wars that burned entire continents. They split atoms and walked on their moon and built machines that could think, all because they needed better ways to survive. The room went silent. Everyone knew what she was suggesting. War. Real war. Not the polite skirmishes the coalition species called conflict. Not the carefully managed disputes resolved by judges and negotiators. War like humans understood it, total, absolute, overwhelming. The president asked if they could win. Admiral Hajin said yes. She said it would not even be close. The Narveen had a large fleet, but they had not fought a real war in 3,000 years. They did not understand what they were facing. None of the coalition species did. The vote was unanimous. Admiral Hajin received authorization to do whatever was necessary. She had one order: make the galaxy regret what they did. Make them understand that humanity could be pushed only so far. Make them remember that the peaceful species they ignored for decades was peaceful by choice, not by nature. Admiral Hajin sent a message to the Coalition Council. She requested one final meeting before the human delegation withdrew to Earth for consultations. The Council agreed, thinking this was normal diplomatic procedure. They expected another plea for justice, another emotional speech about peace and fairness. They got something else entirely. Admiral Hajin stood before the council chamber. Every species representative was there. Voslik sat in his seat looking bored. He did not even try to hide his contempt. Why should he? The council already decided nothing would happen to him. Admiral Hajin spoke. Her voice was calm, cold. She said humanity joined the coalition in good faith. They believed in the dream of peaceful coexistence. They followed every law. They respected every tradition. They tried very hard to be good galactic citizens. Then she said something that made everyone pay attention. She said the galaxy made a mistake. They saw human restraint and thought it was weakness. They saw human patience and thought it was fear. They looked at human history and missed the most important lesson. Humans were not violent because they were savage. They were violent because they were good at it. Very good. And when you murdered their people and laughed about it, you reminded them of skills they tried to forget. She gave the council 72 hours. In that time, they would hand over Voslik and his command staff to stand trial for mass murder. They would pay reparations to the families of the dead. They would issue a formal apology. If they did these things, humanity would accept justice and move forward. If they did not, then humanity would take justice by force. And they would do it in a way that ensured nobody would ever again think humans were weak. Voslik laughed. He actually laughed. He stood up and said humans were welcome to try. The Narveen fleet had 3,000 warships. They had technology refined over millennia. They had never lost a battle. What did humans have? A few dozen ships? A species barely out of its infancy? Please, this was embarrassing. Admiral Hajin looked at him. She did not blink. She did not smile. She just said one sentence that nobody in the council would ever forget. You are about to find out. She left the chamber. The countdown began. The galaxy laughed and prepared for a minor skirmish. They expected a few ships to fight, maybe some angry transmissions. Perhaps humanity would make a show of force and then accept mediation. They were so very wrong. Within 6 hours of Admiral Hajin's ultimatum, things started happening across human space. Ships that looked like ordinary cargo vessels suddenly opened hidden compartments. Military equipment poured out. Construction stations that built civilian habitats suddenly started printing warships instead. Mining colonies activated weapons they were not supposed to have. Captain Minho Che stood on the bridge of the Retribution. It was humanity's largest warship. The Retribution had been in orbit around Mars for 20 years. Other species thought it was a defense platform. A big but slow ship meant to protect the home system. They were wrong about that too. The Retribution was a dreadnought, a planet killer. Its main weapons were illegal according to coalition law. Nobody cared about that anymore. Minho watched his crew prepare the ship for battle. They moved with practiced efficiency. They had trained for this moment their entire careers, hoping it would never come. Lieutenant Sora Bune worked at the tactical station. She was the best strategic mind in the human fleet. Her job was to predict enemy movements and plan responses. She had been running simulations for 3 days straight, the same scenario over and over. Human fleet versus Narveen fleet. The results never changed. Humanity won every time, not by a little bit, by a lot. The Narveen would be destroyed completely within 48 hours. Maybe less. Minho asked her if she was certain. Sora showed him the numbers. The Narveen had better individual ships. Their shields were stronger. Their weapons were more advanced. But they fought like it was a sport. They had rules. They had honor. They tried to disable enemy ships, not destroy them. They gave warnings before firing. They accepted surrenders. Humans did not fight that way. Humans fought to win as quickly and completely as possible. Every weapon system was designed for maximum damage. Every tactic was built around overwhelming the enemy before they could respond. There was no honor in it, no glory, just cold efficiency. Sora pulled up a display showing human forces. What the galaxy saw was a small fleet, maybe 200 ships. What they did not see was everything else. Stealth ships that did not show up on scanners, converted civilian vessels with military-grade weapons hidden inside, autonomous drones by the thousands, and weapons platforms scattered throughout space disguised as old satellites and space junk. The total came to over 12,000 combat-capable vessels, plus the weapons platforms, plus the drone swarms, plus things that were better left as surprises. Minho looked at the numbers and felt sick. This was not going to be a battle. This was going to be a massacre. He said so out loud. Sora did not disagree. She just said that maybe that was the point. Maybe humanity needed to show the galaxy exactly what they could do. Make it so terrible that nobody would ever want to fight humans again. Back on Earth, Ambassador Taiyong made one last attempt at peace. He sent private messages to every council member. He explained what was about to happen. He begged them to reconsider, to hand over Voslix, to avoid the coming disaster. Most did not reply. A few sent polite refusals. One ambassador, of Rexel named Keltor, sent a longer response. He said he believed Taiyong. He understood humans were serious, but the council could not give in to threats. If they handed over Voslix now, it would set a terrible precedent. Every species would think they could threaten violence to get what they wanted. Taiyong wrote back immediately. He said the precedent being set was different. The precedent was that the powerful could murder the weak without consequences. That laws only mattered when convenient. That justice was optional. Was that really better? Keltor never replied. The 72-hour deadline approached. The Narveen fleet gathered in formation near their forward defensive line. 3,000 warships, the largest military force assembled in coalition space in over 1,000 years. They arranged themselves in the traditional battle pattern, a strong center with flexible wings. It was a formation that had won them every conflict for millennia. High Chancellor Voslix broadcast a message to the galaxy. He stood on the bridge of his flagship, surrounded by his officers. He looked confident, amused even. He said humanity's tantrum had gone on long enough. It was time to teach these children a lesson. The Narveen would be merciful. They would disable human ships rather than destroy them. They would accept surrender quickly. There was no need for excessive bloodshed. He finished by offering humans one final chance. Withdraw now. Apologize for the threats. Accept the Council's judgment. If they did this, the Narveen would forget this unfortunate incident. They could all move forward as friends. The deadline expired. No human ships appeared at the defensive line. The Narveen waited. Their sensors showed nothing. Had humans changed their minds? Decided to back down after all? Voslix smiled. Of course they did. They were smart enough to know when they were beaten. Then his communication officer received a priority message from Varshek Prime, the Narveen homeworld. The message was 3 words long. We are burning. Voslix demanded details. What came back made him feel cold. Human ships had appeared in his home system. Not the defensive line. Not the forward positions. Home. They hit every military installation in orbit. Every shipyard. Every communication relay. Every sensor station. Gone. Destroyed in less than 20 minutes. and they had done it without touching a single civilian target. Every strike was precise, surgical. The message was clear. We can reach anywhere. We can hit anything. And we choose our targets very carefully. Voslix ordered his fleet to return home immediately, protect the homeworld, stop the attack. His commanders rushed to comply. 3,000 ships turned and jumped to hyperspace. They would arrive at Varshek Prime in 6 hours. They would crush these human raiders. They would show them what happened when you attacked Narveen territory. What Voslix did not know was that the raid on his homeworld was already over. The human ships had finished their mission and left before he even got the first message, and now his entire fleet was traveling through hyperspace in a predictable pattern to a known destination. Admiral Hodgin had planned this moment perfectly. You do not fight where the enemy expects. You do not attack when they are ready. You hit them when they are moving, when they are disorganized, when they are thinking about something else. The Narvian fleet dropped out of hyperspace at their staging point near Varshek Prime. They expected to see the system under attack. Instead, they saw something else. Space itself seemed to explode. 40,000 mines detonated at once. Humans had seeded the area weeks ago during routine cargo runs. The mines looked like space debris, old equipment, trash. Nobody paid attention to them. Now they revealed their true nature. Each mine was a small fusion bomb. By themselves, they were not that dangerous to a warship, but 40,000 of them going off together in a coordinated pattern created a kill zone nobody could survive. 400 Narvian ships simply ceased to exist, vaporized instantly. Another 300 took critical damage. The surviving ships tried to form defensive positions. They raised shields, charged weapons, sent out sensor scans looking for the attackers. They found nothing. For 30 seconds, nothing happened. Maybe the ambush was over. Maybe they could regroup. Then the human fleet opened fire. The Retribution and 15 other dreadnoughts had been waiting in position for 2 days. Hidden by stealth fields, not moving, not transmitting, just waiting. Now they fired their main weapons. Weapons that the Coalition banned 3,000 years ago as too destructive, too terrible, too barbaric relativistic mass drivers. Tungsten rods accelerated to 90% of light speed. There were no lasers, no missiles, no energy weapons. Just physics, just mass moving at incredible velocity. When a tungsten rod moving that fast hit a ship, the kinetic energy released was greater than a nuclear bomb. And there was no defense. The rods were too small to detect until impact. They moved too fast to evade. Point defense systems could not track them. Shields meant nothing. A Narveen battlecruiser took a direct hit. The entire ship transformed into a ball of superheated plasma. Not damaged, not disabled, erased. Minho watched from the Retribution's bridge. He had seen the simulations. He knew what would happen, but seeing it in reality was different. This was not war. This was extermination. He felt his stomach turn. His communication officer said the Narveen were requesting parley. They wanted to talk, negotiate. Surely there was a way to stop this madness. Minho looked at his orders. They were very clear. He denied the request. Admiral Hodgin had given the Narveen 72 hours to talk. They chose violence instead. Now they got to experience what human violence looked like when unleashed without restraint. The battle continued. Carrier groups launched their drone swarms. Thousands of small autonomous craft. Each one carried explosives. They moved in coordinated waves, overwhelming enemy defenses through sheer numbers. Where the Narveen expected dozens of fighters, they faced thousands of drones. A Narveen admiral broadcast a desperate message on all frequencies. He said this was barbarism. This was slaughter. There was no honor in this. They demanded the humans stop and fight properly. Admiral Hodgin responded on the same frequency. Her voice was cold, empty of emotion. She said there was no honor in murdering 412 unarmed researchers either. The Narveen wanted war. This was war. Real war, not the pretend battles they were used to. This was what happened when you fought a species that learned to kill before they learned to think. 6 hours into the engagement, the Narveen fleet was broken. Of 3,000 ships, over 2,000 were destroyed. 400 more were too damaged to fight. The rest scattered in every direction, trying to escape. Trying to find sanctuary somewhere, anywhere. The human fleet had not lost a single capital ship. Some destroyers took damage. 47 crew members died. That was all. Lieutenant Sora's predictions were accurate within 2%. The galaxy watched in horror. This was not supposed to be possible. The Narveen were one of the most powerful military forces in known space. They had never lost a battle in their entire history. And humans had destroyed them in less than a day. Admiral Hodgin sent one more message. This time to the Coalition Council. She said the hunt for Voslix would continue. Any species that harbored him would be considered hostile. Any species that tried to interfere would share his fate. Humanity was done asking for permission, done accepting excuses, done pretending to be weak. The galaxy had waged war on humans. Now they were learning what that meant. The Coalition Council met in emergency session. Every representative was present. The holographic displays showed data from the battle, numbers that did not make sense. A military force that outnumbered humans 3-1 had been destroyed in 6 hours. The greatest fleet in Coalition space had been reduced to scattered refugees running for their lives. Ambassador Taeyong stood before them. For the first time in his 30-year career, he did not smile. He did not offer peaceful words. He just looked at them and waited. A Vrexel representative spoke first. She demanded to know how humans hid such military power, how they built weapons that should have been impossible for their technology level, why their psychological evaluations never revealed such capacity for violence. Taeyong responded quietly. He said humanity never hid anything. Every report they submitted was accurate. Every psychological profile was truthful. The problem was not human deception. The problem was that nobody asked the right questions. Yes, humans had a violent history, but the psychologists interpreted that as meaning humans were violent by nature. They missed the real truth. Humans were survivors. There was a difference. Violence was random and chaotic. What humans did to the Narveen was neither. It was calculated, precise, efficient, predictable. Another representative asked why humans needed such weapons if they were peaceful. Taeyong explained patiently. Humans learned a long time ago that you do not wait until war starts to prepare for it. You prepare during peace so that war never becomes necessary, or if it does become necessary, you end it quickly before it destroys everything. The council erupted in arguments. Some species demanded human ships leave Coalition space immediately. Others proposed economic sanctions. A few wanted to expel humanity from the Coalition entirely, make them outcasts, isolate them until they learned to behave properly. Taeyong let them argue. Finally, he raised his hand for silence. He said they were missing the point. Humanity did not want dominance. They did not want territory or power or control. They wanted one thing: justice for 412 murdered civilians. That was all. Give them Voslix. Accept responsibility. Make amends. That was the price for peace. But if the council refused, if they continued to protect war criminals, then humanity would consider that a declaration. Not of war against the Narveen, of war against the entire concept that some species were above the law. The chamber fell silent. Because everyone understood what he meant. Humanity had just proven they could destroy the most powerful military force in Coalition space. What could they do to everyone else? While the council debated, Captain Minho led a task force hunting the scattered Narveen ships. His orders were specific. Find High Chancellor Voslix. Bring him to justice. Do not stop until this mission was complete. Tracking fleeing ships was not easy. Space was vast. The Narveen survivors had split up, each group heading to different Coalition worlds seeking asylum. But humans had advantages. Their stealth ships were invisible to standard sensors. They could go anywhere, watch anything. And they had patience. Lieutenant Sora analyzed the data. She looked at which ships went where, which commanders had connections to which species, which planets had good defensive capabilities. After 3 days of work, she narrowed it down to 2 possibilities. Voslix was either on Volusian Prime or hiding in the Torvin system. The Volusian Confederation was one of the more powerful Coalition members. They controlled 17 systems and had a strong defense fleet. Their matriarch Selenra made a public announcement. She said the Confederation would provide sanctuary to Narveen refugees. This included High Chancellor Voslix and his staff. They would not be handed over to human vengeance. The galaxy must stand united against aggression. Admiral Hodgin responded immediately. She sent a message directly to Matriarch Selenra. The message was polite but very clear. Humanity had no quarrel with the Volusian people, but harboring war criminals was unacceptable. She gave them 24 hours to reconsider. Selenra refused. She said principles mattered more than threats. The Confederation had defended the persecuted for centuries. They would not abandon that tradition now, no matter how dangerous humans claimed to be. 24 hours later, something impossible happened. A single human stealth ship infiltrated Velusian Prime's defense network. It avoided every patrol, bypassed every sensor grid, landed in the capital city without anyone noticing. A team of 6 human soldiers entered the fortress where Voslix was hiding. They stunned the guards without killing anyone. They grabbed Voslix, and they left. The whole operation took 23 minutes. Not a single shot was fired. Not one person died, but Voslix was gone, captured from what was supposed to be the most secure location in the Confederation. Matriarch Selenra was furious. She demanded explanations. How did humans penetrate their defenses? How did they know exactly where Voslix was? This was an act of war, an invasion of sovereign territory. The Confederation would respond with force. Admiral Hajin sent another message. She apologized for the necessity of the incursion, but she pointed out that human forces could have destroyed the fortress, could have killed the guards, could have done significant damage. Instead, they took only what they came for and left everyone else unharmed. This was restraint, not aggression. More importantly, it was a demonstration. If humans could reach into one of the most defended locations in Coalition space and take one person without anyone stopping them, what else could they do? What if next time they were not so gentle? The Confederation quietly dropped their threats of retaliation. They requested that humans please not do that again. Admiral Hajin agreed, provided nobody else decided to harbor war criminals. Voslix was brought to a neutral station for trial. The proceedings were broadcast live across the entire galaxy. Every species watched. This was unprecedented. The Coalition had not held a major war crimes trial in over 2,000 years. They had not needed to. Everyone followed the rules. The evidence against Voslix was overwhelming. Communication logs showed he ordered the attack on the research ship. Targeting data proved it was deliberate, not an accident. Members of his own crew testified that he laughed about it afterward. Said it would teach humans some humility. But the trial became about more than just Voslix. It became about the entire system. About what happens when laws only apply to the weak. About what justice means when the powerful can ignore it. Ambassador Taeyong testified as an expert witness. The judges asked him to explain human perspective. Why had humanity responded with such overwhelming force? Why not accept mediation? Why not trust the council to eventually provide justice? Taeyong answered honestly. He said humanity tried that approach for 63 years. They trusted the system. They believed in the dream of peaceful coexistence. Then 412 of their people were murdered and the system did nothing. The council formed a committee. They discussed procedures. They debated jurisdiction. Meanwhile, the killer sat in his palace laughing about it. What would any species do in that situation? Accept that their people's lives meant nothing? Smile and pretend everything was fine? Or demand actual justice, backed by the only currency that the powerful truly respected? A judge interrupted him. She said the difference was that civilized species accepted the council's mediation process, even when it was slow, even when it was frustrating. That was what maintained peace. Taeyong looked at her calmly. He asked a simple question. Had any civilized species ever actually been tested? For 3,000 years, everyone played by the rules because everyone agreed to. But what happened when someone broke the rules and the system refused to respond? The council proved the answer. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. So humanity demonstrated that there were still consequences in the universe, that you could not murder people and hide behind politics, that justice was not optional. The courtroom went quiet, because everyone knew he was right. The coalition's peace was not built on enlightenment or morality. It was built on everyone agreeing not to test it. Humans tested it and found it hollow. The trial continued for 2 weeks. In the end, the verdict was unanimous. Voslix was guilty of mass murder. He was guilty of abuse of power. He was guilty of crimes against the peace. His sentence was life imprisonment on a penal colony. The Narvine Dominion was ordered to pay substantial reparations and reform their military command structure. But the real verdict came from Admiral Hajin. She released a statement to the entire galaxy. She said humanity came to the stars hoping to leave violence behind. They wanted to be explorers and artists and dreamers. But the galaxy showed them that even here, even among the stars, there were predators who thought might made right, so humanity would serve a new role. They would be the enforcers, the ones who ensured that laws had meaning, that justice was real, that the strong could not prey on the weak without consequences. Not because they wanted this role, but because someone had to do it, and they were the only ones willing. She ended with a warning that echoed across every world in coalition space. Humanity sought peace. They would always prefer peace. But never again would anyone mistake human restraint for weakness. They were not weak. They were not soft. They were not easy prey. They were just very good at pretending to be civilized. The galaxy finally understood. The peaceful species they had ignored for decades was never actually peaceful. They were patient. There was a difference. And that difference had cost the Narveen everything. 3 months after the trial, the Coalition Council made an unprecedented decision. They would establish a rapid response military force, a group that could act quickly when crises emerged. And they asked humanity to lead it. Admiral Hodgin accepted, but only with conditions. The force would operate under human doctrine. Overwhelming power applied precisely. Clear rules of engagement. Zero tolerance for attacks on civilians. And when they acted, they would act decisively. No half measures. No political compromises. Just swift, absolute justice. The Council agreed to every condition, because they finally understood something important. Their 3,000 years of peace was not built on enlightenment. It was built on the absence of anyone willing to break the rules. Now someone had broken them, and only humans had proven capable of enforcing them. The galaxy had waged war on humans. They regretted it. But more than that, they learned from it. Sometimes peace requires the threat of overwhelming violence. Sometimes justice requires force. And sometimes the most dangerous species is the one that understands violence so well they choose not to use it, unless absolutely necessary. Humanity had become what the galaxy needed, but never knew. The guardians who could protect the innocent precisely because they understood how to destroy the guilty. 6 months after the Narveen War, the galaxy looked different. Human ships patrolled coalition space alongside vessels from other species. But everyone knew the truth. When there was real trouble, when someone needed to be stopped, it was humans who responded. Captain Minho, now promoted to admiral, commanded the Coalition Rapid Response Fleet from his flagship, the Retribution. His fleet included ships from 12 different species. It was supposed to show unity, cooperation, shared responsibility for galactic peace. But Minho knew what it really showed. Nobody wanted to fight humans, so they joined them instead. Safer to be on the same side as the species that destroyed the Narveen fleet in 6 hours. His second-in-command was a Vrexil named Keltor, the same Keltor who had been an ambassador during the crisis. He resigned from politics and joined the military instead. He said he wanted to understand humans better, to learn how they thought about warfare and peace. One day, Keltor asked Minho a question that had been bothering him for months. He asked how humans could live with what they did, how they could kill so many and feel no guilt, how they slept at night knowing they had destroyed an entire fleet. Minho stopped what he was doing. He looked at Keltor for a long moment. Then he asked if Keltor thought humans felt nothing. If he really believed they were emotionless killers who enjoyed violence. Keltor admitted that was how it seemed. Humans were so efficient at warfare, so calm during battle, so willing to use overwhelming force. It suggested they had no feelings about it. Minho shook his head. He explained that the opposite was true. Humans felt everything. Every death weighed on them. Every ship destroyed haunted them. But they had learned something over thousands of years of warfare on Earth. Emotions during battle got people killed, got friends killed, got innocent people killed. So humans learned to separate feelings from actions. During combat, you pushed emotions aside and did what needed to be done, quickly, efficiently, without hesitation, because hesitation meant more people died, meant the war lasted longer, meant more suffering for everyone. After the battle, then you felt it. Then you mourned. Then you questioned and doubted and carried the weight of what you did. But during the battle itself, you were a weapon. Cold, precise, unstoppable. That was how humans survived. How they won. How they protected what they loved. Keltor asked if Minho had nightmares about the Narveen War. Minho said yes. Every night. He saw the ships exploding. Saw the casualty numbers. Saw the faces of his own crew members who died. 47 people under his command. He knew all their names. Visited all their families. Carried that weight every day. But he also knew that if he had hesitated, if he had been gentle, if he had tried to minimize Narveen casualties at the cost of extending the battle, more humans would have died. More of his crew, more of his friends, and that was unacceptable. Keltor was quiet for a long time. Finally, he said he understood now. Humans were not monsters. They were just willing to become monsters temporarily to protect what they loved. And that made them more dangerous than actual monsters, because monsters were predictable. Humans were not. 3 small conflicts arose in the months after the Narvean War. Each time, aggressive species started making threats, started moving fleets, started preparing for military action. And each time, Admiral Hodgin sent a single message. 2 words. Remember, Narveen, every time the conflict de-escalated immediately. Ships returned to their home systems. Diplomats started talking instead of threatening. Problems got solved through negotiation. Nobody wanted to be the next example. Lieutenant Sora, now a commander and chief strategic advisor, monitored galactic reactions carefully. She compiled reports on how different species viewed humanity. The results were mixed. Some species feared humans deeply, others respected them. A few even liked them, appreciating that someone finally enforced the rules. But there was a worrying trend. Several species had started building up their militaries, not to attack, but to defend against potential human aggression. They looked at what happened to the Narveen and decided they needed better protection, just in case humans ever decided they were next. Sora brought this to Admiral Hodgin's attention. She pointed out that fear could be as dangerous as aggression. Scared species made bad decisions, built bigger weapons, created alliances based on mutual fear rather than shared values. This could lead to the exact kind of arms race that the coalition was supposed to prevent. Admiral Hodgin listened carefully. Then she asked what Sora suggested. Sora said humanity needed to show another side, not just their capacity for violence, but their capacity for protection, for building rather than destroying, for helping rather than threatening. So Admiral Hodgin initiated a new program. Human ships started responding to non-military emergencies, natural disasters, medical crises. Ships in distress. Anywhere help was needed, humans showed up. They used their powerful military vessels to evacuate civilians from disaster zones, to deliver aid to suffering populations. To rescue stranded ships, it was a calculated decision. Show the galaxy that human power could protect as well as punish. That the weapons designed for war could also save lives. That the species everyone feared could also be relied upon in times of need. Slowly, opinions began to shift. Yes, humans were dangerous. Yes, you did not want to make them angry. But they were also dependable, fair, willing to help when asked. The fear did not go away, but respect started growing alongside it. Ambassador Taeyong had resigned after the war. He felt his life's work had been destroyed. All those years building bridges, creating friendships, establishing trust, gone in less than a week of violence. He could not continue representing humanity when everything he believed in seemed wrong. His replacement was Ambassador Yoonji Shin. She was younger, more direct, and had a military background. She took a completely different approach to diplomacy. Where Taeyong had been apologetic about human nature, Yoonji was unapologetic. She did not pretend humans were something they were not. She just explained what they were and let other species decide how to feel about it. In her first speech to the Coalition Council, she laid out human philosophy clearly. She said humans did not believe in complicated moral frameworks. They believed in simple rules. Do not harm innocent people. If someone harms innocent people, stop them. If they cannot be stopped by words, stop them by force. Always use enough force to ensure the problem ended permanently. Some representatives found this crude, simplistic, lacking in nuance. Yoonji agreed. She said humans lacked nuance on purpose. Nuance allowed people to justify terrible actions. Nuance let the powerful exploit the weak while claiming it was complicated. Humans rejected that. They chose clarity instead. You murdered our people. That was wrong. We punished you. That was justice. Everything else was just noise. The council did not know how to respond to this new approach. Taeyong had been diplomatic, careful with words, always seeking compromise. Yoonji was none of those things. She said what she meant what she said, and she made no apologies. Privately, many representatives admitted they preferred it. At least with Yoonji, you knew where you stood. There were no hidden meanings. No political games. Just direct, honest communication. A year after the war, something unexpected happened. The Narveen Dominion requested a meeting with human leadership. Not to protest, not to make demands, to apologize. A new High Chancellor had taken power. She was younger than Voslix, more practical. She understood that the old ways were gone. The Narveen could either adapt or fade into irrelevance. She chose adaptation. She met with Admiral Hodgen on neutral ground. She brought no guards, no staff, just herself and a simple message. The Narveen had been arrogant. They had believed themselves superior. They had killed without thinking, because they assumed there would be no consequences. They were wrong. And they had paid a terrible price for that arrogance. But more than that, she thanked Admiral Hodgen, not for the destruction, but for the lesson. The Narveen had grown weak through centuries of unchallenged power. They had forgotten what real strength looked like. Humans reminded them, and in doing so, gave them a chance to become better. The new Narveen Dominion was different, smaller, humbler. They reformed their military to focus on defense rather than power projection. They reached out to species they had bullied before and made amends. They became, in many ways, what the coalition was supposed to be all along. Admiral Hodgen accepted the apology. She even agreed to a limited partnership. Human advisors would help train Narveen forces in modern defensive doctrine. In return, Narveen scientists would share advanced shield technology with humanity. It was a small start, but it was a start. On Earth, people watched these developments with mixed feelings. They were proud of what humanity accomplished, proud that they defended themselves, proud that they made the galaxy safer. But they were also uncomfortable with their new role, with being feared, with being seen as the enforcers and punishers. Many humans still dreamed of the peaceful future they thought they were building. The future where humanity explored and created and learned alongside other species, where violence was unnecessary, where everyone truly was equal. But others argued that dream was naive. The galaxy was not peaceful because species were enlightened. It was peaceful because nobody had tested the system. Humans tested it and found it broken. Now they had to fix it. Not by destroying it, but by making it real. By ensuring that laws actually meant something. That justice was more than words. Maybe that was not the role humanity wanted, but it was the role the galaxy needed. And sometimes, duty mattered more than desire. 2 years after the Narveen War, something remarkable happened. A small coalition species called the Patrani came under attack from pirates. Their defense force was minimal. They sent out a distress call but did not expect help. Their system was remote, not strategically important. Nobody had reason to come. Admiral Minho's rapid response fleet arrived 3 hours later. They destroyed the pirate fleet in 17 minutes without a single Patrani casualty. Then they stayed for 2 weeks, helping, repair damaged stations and training local security forces. They refused payment, refused thanks, just said this was what the fleet was for, protecting those who could not protect themselves. The Patrani had feared humans before that. Everyone did. But after the rescue, they became humanity's strongest advocates. They told other small species that yes, humans were dangerous, but only to those who deserved it. To everyone else, they were guardians. Slowly, grudgingly, the galaxy was learning a new lesson. The species that understood violence best was also the species most committed to preventing it. The warriors were the peacekeepers, and that strange contradiction was exactly what made them effective, because humans knew what war really cost, and they would do anything to prevent it, even if that meant being ready to wage it better than anyone else. 5 years passed since the day the Narveen fleet burned. 5 years since humanity stopped pretending to be something they were not. The galaxy had settled into a new normal, a strange balance between fear and trust, between respect and caution. Admiral Hodgen Park announced her retirement. She was 63 years old and had served humanity for 4 decades. She had seen first contact with aliens, watched humanity join the coalition, led her species through its first and hopefully last galactic war. She was tired, ready to rest. Her retirement ceremony took place on Earth in front of the memorial to the Galileo's crew. 412 names carved into black stone, The names of people who died doing nothing but research. People whose deaths changed everything. Thousands attended. Humans, obviously, but also representatives from 73 different species. They came to honor the woman who reshaped galactic politics, who proved that laws meant nothing without enforcement, who made the galaxy safer by making it fear consequences again. Admiral Hodgin stood before the memorial and spoke. Her voice was strong despite her age. She said humanity came to the stars with hope. They wanted to explore, to learn, to build friendships across the void. They believed the galaxy would be better than Earth, more peaceful, more fair, more just. They were disappointed. The galaxy was not more evolved. It was just luckier. It had not faced the tests that Earth faced, had not been forced to choose between survival and morality, had not learned that sometimes violence was the only language powerful beings understood. So humanity taught that lesson. Not because they wanted to, but because 412 of their people died and nobody cared. Because a powerful species murdered civilians and faced no consequences. Because the dream of galactic peace was revealed as a comfortable lie. She looked at the memorial, at the names carved in stone, at the faces in the pictures displayed around it. Young researchers who wanted to discover new things, who died for finding crystals in the wrong place at the wrong time. She told them they did not die in vain. Their sacrifice awakened humanity to reality, made them understand that peace required strength, that justice required force, that sometimes the only way to prevent war was to be so good at it that nobody dared start one. The galaxy might never love humanity, but it would respect them. More importantly, it would think very carefully before harming anyone under human protection. That was the legacy. That was the promise. That was why 412 deaths meant the galaxy would never be the same. She stepped down from the podium. The crowd stood in silence. Then slowly they began to applaud. Not because they were happy, but because they recognized truth when they heard it. Admiral Hodgin had not made the galaxy gentler. She made it honest. And sometimes honesty was more important than comfort. Admiral Minho took over as Supreme Commander of Human Forces. He was 42 years old, young for such responsibility, but he had proven himself during the Narvian War and in the years after. He understood both the cost of violence and the necessity of it. His first major decision was to establish the Interspecies Military Academy, a place where soldiers from all coalition species could train together, learn from each other, more importantly, learn to understand each other. The Academy's purpose was not just military education. It was cultural exchange, humans teaching other species about warfare, other species teaching humans about things they had forgotten in their violent history, art, philosophy, different ways of thinking about existence. Commander Sora became the Academy's first commandant. She was the perfect choice, brilliant strategist but also thoughtful, someone who understood that military power was useless without wisdom to guide it. She designed a curriculum that taught not just how to fight but when to fight. More importantly, when not to fight. Her most popular class was called Understanding Human Strategic Doctrine. Students came from across the galaxy to learn how humans thought about warfare. What they discovered surprised them. Humans were not naturally violent. They did not enjoy killing. They did not glorify war. In fact, they hated it more than most species because they understood it better. They had thousands of years of history showing what war actually meant. The suffering, the waste, the permanent scars it left on societies and individuals. But they also understood something the peaceful coalition species had forgotten. Sometimes war was necessary. Not desirable, not good, but necessary. And when it became necessary, the moral thing to do was end it as quickly as possible with as few total casualties as possible, even if that meant being brutal in the moment. The Narvian War demonstrated this philosophy perfectly. Yes, humans killed tens of thousands of Narvian soldiers in 6 hours, but that stopped the war immediately, prevented years of conflict, saved millions of lives that would have been lost in a prolonged war. The brutality served mercy. Students struggled with this concept. It seemed contradictory. How could extreme violence serve peace? Sora explained patiently. Violence did not serve peace. Capability for violence served peace. The threat of overwhelming force prevented conflict. Actually using that force was failure, not success. Humanity failed to prevent the Narvian War. But having failed prevention, they ensured it ended quickly. 20 years after the war, new generations had grown up. Young humans who had never known a galaxy that did not respect their species. Young aliens who had always known humans as the enforcers of galactic law. They had different perspectives than their parents. A young human named Jiho enrolled in the Interspecies Academy. His grandfather had died aboard the Galileo. Jiho grew up with that legacy, grew up knowing his family's loss changed history. It gave him unusual perspective. He became friends with a young Narveen named Sorith. Her father had commanded a ship during the war. He survived but carried guilt for serving under Voslix, for participating in the attack that killed innocent people. That guilt shaped Sorith's entire life. Jiho and Sorith represented something new. A generation that inherited their parents' war but chose to build something different with it. They became partners in the academy, top of their class. They showed that humans and Narveen could work together, trust each other, build friendship from the ashes of conflict. When they graduated, they requested assignment to the same ship. Admiral Minho granted the request personally. He assigned them to a patrol vessel responsible for protecting trade routes near formerly contested space. Places where pirates and raiders liked to operate. Places that needed people who understood both strength and restraint. Ambassador Yunji continued her direct approach to diplomacy. She never softened her message, never apologized for what humanity was, but she also worked tirelessly to show humanity's other side. She sponsored cultural exchanges, supported scientific cooperation, pushed for trade agreements that benefited smaller species, not just powerful ones. Under her leadership, humanity became known for two things: absolute reliability as military allies, and absolute fairness in civilian matters. If you were threatened, humans would protect you without question. If you needed help, humans would provide it without expectation of reward. But if you harmed innocents, humans would end you without mercy. It was a simple philosophy. Maybe too simple for sophisticated galactic politics, but it worked. The galaxy had fewer conflicts than any time in recorded history. Piracy declined dramatically. Stronger species thought twice before bullying weaker ones. Laws that existed only on paper before suddenly had real enforcement. Former Ambassador Taiyong watched these developments from Earth. He had spent 5 years in retirement, trying to understand what happened. Trying to reconcile his peaceful philosophy with the violent reality that replaced it. Eventually, he wrote a book. It became one of the most important texts in coalition history. He called it The Paradox of Peace. In it, he argued that his old approach was not wrong exactly, just incomplete. Peace through understanding and cooperation was beautiful, noble, worth striving for. But it only worked when everyone chose to participate. When someone opted out, when someone decided to take what they wanted by force, the system collapsed. Not because peace was weak, but because it lacked the framework to respond to bad actors. Humanity provided that framework, not by abandoning peace, but by recognizing its limits, by understanding that protecting peace sometimes required the threat of war, that maintaining justice sometimes required the application of force, that the best way to avoid violence was to be so capable of it that nobody dared initiate it. The book became required reading at the academy. Students debated its points endlessly. Was Taeyong right? Could you really serve peace through capacity for war, or was that just justification for maintaining military power? Commander Sora used these debates in her classes. She never gave students the answer, just made them think carefully about the questions, about what peace really meant, about what they were willing to do to protect it, about the difference between violence for its own sake and violence in service of justice. 30 years after the Narvian War, something remarkable happened. The Coalition held a ceremony dedicating a new memorial. It honored all those who died in galactic conflicts over the last 3,000 years. The list was surprisingly short, fewer than 10,000 names, a testament to how peaceful the galaxy had been. The memorial included the 412 crew members of the Galileo. It included the Narveen soldiers who died in the war. It included pirates killed while attacking civilian ships, soldiers from a dozen species who gave their lives protecting others, all of them remembered together. Admiral Minho, now in his 60s, attended the ceremony. He stood with Keltor, his old second-in-command who had become one of his closest friends. They looked at the names together. So many dead, so much loss, but also so much prevented. So many wars that never happened because everyone remembered what happened to the Narveen. Keltor asked the question that had haunted him for 3 decades. Was it worth it? Did the ends justify the means? Was creating peace through fear really peace at all? Minho thought about it. He thought about all the conflicts prevented, all the lives saved, all the species that learned to coexist because they feared the alternative. Then he thought about the Narveen soldiers who died, the nightmares he still had, the weight he carried every day. He said he did not know. Maybe there was a better way. Maybe if he was smarter or more creative, he could have found it. But given the choices available at the time, given what he knew and what he could do, he made the best decision possible, and he would live with that decision for the rest of his life. That, he said, was what it meant to be human. To carry the weight of hard choices, to do terrible things when necessary and never pretend they were not terrible, to serve peace by being willing to wage war, to protect innocence by being capable of destroying the guilty. It was not glorious. It was not beautiful. It was not the dream humanity brought to the stars, but it was necessary. And sometimes necessity mattered more than dreams. The galaxy had waged war on humans. They regretted it instantly, not because humans were cruel, but because humans were honest. They did not pretend violence was noble, did not glorify war, did not hide behind pretty words about honor and glory. They just said the truth. We are survivors. We are warriors. We are the species that learned to kill before we learned to think, and we got very good at it. But we also learned something else. That the best warriors are the ones who fight only when they must, who use their strength to protect, not to conquer, who understand that real power is choosing not to use it. That was humanity's gift to the galaxy. Not peace, not enlightenment, not some utopian vision, just honest recognition that peace required guardians, that justice required enforcement, that civilization required someone willing to defend it, even if that meant doing uncivilized things. Humans became those guardians, not because they wanted to, but because when the galaxy needed someone to stand between innocents and predators, they were the only ones willing to step forward. To say no, to draw a line, to make the hard choices that let everyone else sleep safely, and they would carry that burden forever. Because once you took on that responsibility, once you proved you could bear it, you could never put it down. The galaxy would not let you, would need you, would depend on you. That was the real victory. Not destroying the Narveen fleet, not enforcing justice, but accepting the role history gave them and carrying it with dignity, being the warriors who served peace, the soldiers who fought to prevent war, the violent species that chose gentleness whenever possible, and violence only when necessary.